Newt couldn't remember ever walking alone with his mother, just the two of them sharing moments as they did this evening. And for the first time, subconsciously measuring his gait with hers, he realized that even at 12, he was a little taller than she. Halfway home, he broke into his mother's humming. "Mama, can I ask you something?" "Why, yes, boy. What do you want to ask me?" "Well, after the storm, Papa said that the storm and the people killed and everything was doing of God. You care if I ask you why he killed some people and not the others?" Sarah Winger came to a complete stop, and Newt was instantly afraid he had offended her. "Newt?" "Yes, ma'am." "You know your papa and me are religious people, don't you?" "Yes, ma'am." "Well, it would be real easy for me to say you don't question the ways of God, and I was tempted to. But I know deep in my heart that there's more to it than that. It's true he guides us, but we can't depend upon him for everything. We got to do things for ourselves. Now, maybe if Jim had built himself a storm cellar or a stronger house, he wouldn't have got killed so easy. And if little Fanny Johnson's mama hadn't have been drunk, she'd have held on to that lamp, and her daughter wouldn't have got burnt. It's like I say, we got to do some things for ourselves. If you got a battle to fight, you can't rightfully ask the Lord to help you and not the other fellow, now can you?" "No, Mom." "No, son. You got to fight and hope God likes the way you're using your fist. And that goes for the boy you're fighting. Ain't neither one of you got time for praying while you're flinging fists. Too many people, especially some of ours, boy, sit round waiting when they should be out doing. You got to always remember that, boy, always." "Yes, ma'am." "Are we going to live here all our life?" Sarah looked searchingly at him. "Well, don't you like it here?" "I don't know, Mama. I ain't never been no place else." "Well, I hope you won't have to stay here all your life, Newt. It ain't an all good place, and it ain't an all bad place. But you can learn just as much here about people and things as you can learn any place else. Cherokee Flats is sort of like a fruit tree. Some of the people are good, some of them are bad, just like fruit on a tree. You know that, don't you, boy?" "Yes, ma'am." "Well, if you learn to profit from the good and the bad these people do to each other, you'll learn a lot about life. And you'll be a better man for that learning someday, you understand?" "Yes, ma'am." No matter if you go or stay, think of Cherokee Flats like that till the day you die. Let it be your learning tree. Marcus Savage was black and tough, not yet 15 and motherless since birth. He lived with a father who spent most of his time drinking up what little money his junk gathering brought in. The ruggedness of a tough life added years to his body, but his intellect barely matched that of any of the younger boys he now walked with. Yet he was smart in the way that the desperate must be to survive, cunning in the way that the poor must be to cheat their misfortunes. The gang did not like him, but tolerated him, and he felt big in their world, a small world that respected his strength and demanded little of his brain. They were nearing the orchard now, moving stealthily, watching for any sign of life around the corner house of barns. Then they were under the barbed wire fence and into the peach orchard, snatching the fruit from the trees, filling their stomachs and pockets at the same time, unaware of Jake's figure creeping alongside the corral shed, dragging a long buggy whip behind him. He crept, anger in check, biding his time, making sure his chance to lash one, or maybe more, of the culprits who were stealing his prized fruit. They would get away fast, he knew, so surprise and the whip would have to cut the difference between their youthful speed and his feeble jog. Jake pulled his wide-brimmed hat tight to his wrinkled forehead, kicked off his high-heeled boots, and tiptoed the last 2 yards to the clearing. Newt was the first to see the raging, whip-waving farmer bearing down on them. "Run, run," he hollered. "It's Jake!" Beansy, a peach in his mouth and his pockets loaded, shimmied off to a fast start. Skunk tripped over Jappy, who had been munching contentedly on the ground, and they both scrambled to their feet, losing half the juicy loot in their getaway. In a few seconds, Newt was outdistancing Beansy, and glancing back, he and Earl saw the whip lash Marcus Savage's waist. "Ouch!" Marcus yelled. "Ouch!" Peaches flew from his arms in all directions as he desperately tried to evade Jake's cutting whip. "You thieving dogs!" Jake half grunted, half hollered as he struck again, causing Marcus to stumble on the ground. "Stop it!" Marcus yelled. But Jake kept thrashing him. The others, at a safe distance now, turned in time to see Marcus grab Jake by the heel and spin him to the ground. Then Marcus was on top of him, beating him about the face with the whip handle, and above him, kicking him in the face and on the head until Jake lay still on the ground. At last, Marcus threw the whip on Jake's prostrate form, filled his pockets with peaches, and trotted toward the others. As they started toward Flynn's River, Benji's scared voice stopped them cold. "Uh-oh, there comes his wife." You little heathens, she screamed, shaking her fist in the air. "We'll get you for this, we'll get you." Then she knelt over her husband and began shaking him. No one ate any more of the stolen fruit except Marcus as the 6 boys made their way toward Flynn's River. And as he chomped viciously, his powerful black muscles flexed a warning to his companions. "Be with me if trouble comes, or suffer the consequences." The old man pushed his damn luck too far. I tried to kill him. "What you think they're going to do?" Benji asked. "I don't know," Marcus growled, "and I don't give a damn. All of you saw him beating me with that whip first." Nobody spoke, and this rankled Marcus. "Well, what about it? You did, didn't you?" "Oh, yeah, sure. You're right, Marcus. Yeah," they chorused. "Well, Winger, what about you? You with me or not?" Newt sensed trouble, and he didn't want it. "Yeah, I saw him hit you with the whip." He wanted to say more, and Marcus wasn't exactly satisfied with the tone of his voice. "Well, anything else? Let's get everything straight right now." He glowered at Newt. "Well, I said all I had to say, only I don't think you ought to beat that old man the way you did after you got him down, that's all." "Well, now, fellas, ain't that fine? He's feeling sorry for that poor old Peckerwood who was beating the hell out of me, one of his own gang." Newt bristled, partly from fear, partly from anger. He couldn't whip Marcus, and he knew it, and he wasn't quite sure yet where the rest of the gang's sympathy lay. He chose his next words carefully. "All you fellows know old man Connor ain't that bad. Jappy's paw works for him, and so does Skunk's paw, sometimes. And he gave us a whole barrel of cornmeal last winter when—" Marcus clenched his fist. "I don't give a damn what he gave you last winter, nothing else." Newt felt Skunk and Jappy at his side. "All I want to know is you with us or not." Benji moved in next to Newt, and Earl, getting the drift of things, half-heartedly followed. "And I want you to know it right now," Marcus went on. "Well, I'm always with the fellows here," Newt answered. Marcus's eyes skimmed the opposition. Okay. Let's all stick together," he snarled. "Let's stick together, huh?" Newt had won, temporarily at least, and Marcus knew it, but he wasn't forgetting it. Newt slipped into the cowshed by the back way and changed again into his Sunday clothes. When he started toward the house, the sight of the dusty motorcycle leaning against the porch made his heart jump. His mind started racing. Kirky, the sheriff, was looking for him. "Newt?" It was Prissy, speaking in a hushed voice from the kitchen window above him. "Boy, are you going to get it. What you nuts doing stealing peaches and beating up old man Kiner? Boy, you sure going to get it. Mama's mad as a wet hen." "Kirky in there talking to her?" Newt whispered. "Yeah, and he's looking for you and Marcus and the rest of them nuts. You better get in here, boy." "Is that Newt, Prissy?" Newt's heart sank at the sting of his mother's voice. "Tell him I said to get in here, quick." Newt was in the room before she could call out again. He stood close to the door, his right toe stabbing the carpet, hands entwined behind him, gazing at the floor. "Look up, boy." Newt's eyes shot up at the heated command. "Now I want you to tell me exactly what happened, every bit of it." Newt avoided looking at Kirky, but his mind's eye saw the smirk on his red, craggy face, the tobacco juice caked at the corners of his thin lips, The dirty khaki, putty-type pants and leather leggings strapped about the fat legs, spread now with vulgar authority, the crusty western hat off his balding head at Sarah's request, and his big, sweaty, smelly torso draped with two-gun western holsters, each stuffed with an ugly .45 revolver. "Well, we just stole the peaches and run, that's all." "Yeah, after you beat up old Jake Kiner damn near to death," Kirky cut in. "You watch your tongue in this house, Kirky." "We don't use cuss words here," Sarah admonished. Newt watched Kirky's lips curl apart, exposing his yellow-brown teeth. "Jake's lying up there in the county hospital beat to a pup. I'm just trying to get down to the bottom of this mess." His voice lowered in a tinge of an apology. "Well, there's a respectable way in going about it," Sarah countered. "Now, Newt, tell me, did you hit Mr. Kiner?" "I want the truth and nothing but." "No, ma'am. I swear on the Bible I didn't touch him." "Well, who did, boy?" Kirky shouted. "Who did?" "Well, he was beating Marcus awful bad with a buggy whip, and he wouldn't stop. He just kept on beating him." "Well, what you saying is that Marcus Savage did it. Is that right, boy?" Kirky urged. "Tell me, son, was it Marcus?" Sarah's eyes held Newt's, searching them for the truth. "Well, yes, ma'am, it was Marcus, but he was trying to keep Mr. Kiner from hurting him." "Your story better check out with the others, boy. I'm coming back for you." Kirky slammed the screen door and went out. He turned just before he mounted his motorcycle. "The whites round here ain't going to like what happened to old Jake very much." Sarah Winger's reply was fast and free of emotion. "We don't expect no trouble, but we can take care of ourselves if it comes." Kirky grunted, kicked his motorcycle to a start, and roared off. Sarah looked at her son. "Boy," she said, "don't you know it's a sin to steal, especially on Sunday?" The next day, Kirky got Judge Kavanaugh to sign the necessary papers without too much trouble. The hearing lasted hardly 30 minutes. "You're a blight on your race and on society," the judge scolded Marcus, his white mane trembling over his angry face. He signed the document that would rid Cherokee Flats of Marcus for at least a year. "What's blight mean, Judge?" The skin around Judge Kavanaugh's knuckles tightened as his fists clenched, and he rose above Marcus like a mountain. "I'll tell you what it means. It means you are a disgrace to your people and to your town. And it also means that you're going to rot in Spitz Reformatory unless you rid yourself of the evil that's inside your ornery hide." Marcus smiled an ugly smile. "I ain't got no people, and I ain't rotting no place but in my grave, Judge. And by that time, you gonna be long gone. Get him out of here, Kirky, before I lose my temper." Kirky welcomed the order, and grasping his prisoner by the scruff of his neck, applied brute force to his removal from the judge's chambers. At the cell door, he gave Marcus a resounding kick in the behind. Then Kirky slammed the cell door and twisted the key. Marcus turned and grinned evilly. "One of these days, it's going to be me and you dirty Harry Peckerwood. You remember that." "I'm sure going to remember that, boy. I'm sure going to remember that. I'm going to remember that every day and every night you're in that hole where they're going to take you tomorrow. And if you was ever unlucky enough to get out and come back here, I'll be waiting and remembering. Now don't you forget that. I'll be remembering, boy." Their eyes burned toward each other for a moment. Then Kirky spat on the floor and stomped away. In August, Newt began riding the Kiner land with his brother Pete, whom Jake had hired as a temporary foreman. And to Pete's satisfaction, Newt went about learning to mount his father's quarter horse on the run, to ride with his head up and his heels down, to swerve his mount easily in and out of a moving herd. On Saturdays, he peddled brooms with Rob Winger, his blind uncle. and during this time he came to marvel at the philosophies Rob imparted to him on their trips about the village. His uncle talked to him of all the things his father neglected to talk about. It was almost as if Rob, knowing his brother Jack's shortcomings, tried in some way to make up for them. And Newt, already perceptive enough to realize this, looked with regret upon the September morning when they would make their last walk of the year around Cherokee Flats, selling a broom now and then, discussing the ways of man in the universe. Crossing the Frisco tracks that morning on his way to meet Rob, Newt saw his uncle, brooms over his shoulders, tapping the ground with his cane and approaching the crossing. Newt broke into a trot, trying to catch him before he got to the drop-off leading to the tracks. "Wait up, Uncle Rob," he hollered. "I'm coming." Rob stopped and stood waiting until Newt came to his side. "Hi there, boy. Thought I'd come to meet you." They moved toward the tracks, Newt holding Rob's hand just above the nubs, where the fingers had been blown off in an explosion years before. About 20 yards from the crossing, Rob stopped, holding his cane to the ground, and Newt looked up at him, seeing his eyelids blinking rapidly behind the dark glasses. And before long, the wheezing locomotive came pounding around the bend. As it rumbled by, pulling its 8 coaches, Newt saw the images of the engineer and the passengers blurring past. "Boy, I sure would like to be on there," Newt said as they started across the tracks. "Why?" Rob asked. "Oh, just to be going someplace far away like them people are." "Maybe there are people going back home or to places they don't want to be going to." Rob was smiling. "Well, at least they've been someplace," Newt said. "Take me. I ain't ever even been out of Cherokee Flats except to Easton or Fort Miles." "Well, you're young yet, boy. You got lots of time for that." "You ever been any place else, Uncle Rob, besides here?" "Oh, a trip up to Kansas City once when I was a boy many years ago. I guess that's the only time." "Mind if I ask you something?" "Go ahead." "Well, you told me how you got your eyes blowed out in an explosion. Well, that's been a long time ago. Can you remember what you used to see before that? Can you remember what color the sky was, what a bird looks like, and things like that?" "Well, yes, Newt. I do remember things like they were then. I see blue and red and yellow, green, and all the colors. And sometimes I have a little fun with color in my darkness. Like imagining you were green with pink ears, and a blue nose, and purple hair." "Really, Uncle Rob?" "Yep, boy, it's so. And you know what, Newt? I think sometimes if all the people in the world were made up of colors, just like that, instead of just some black and some white, it would be a happier world. A wonderful world all mixed up with wonderful colored people. Nobody being the same as anybody else." Newt closed his eyes for an instant, trying to imagine such a world. Then he opened them again and laughed. "Maybe your world's prettier than ours." Christmas at Spitz School for Boys wasn't much different from any other day. A few of the exceptionally well-behaved boys were granted trips home for the holidays. The others received a pork chop dinner and a small bag of peppermint candies. Marcus ate alone in the dimness of his cell. The card from Newt, Beansy, Jappy, Earl, and Skunk was propped on the table beside his cot. He glanced at the scribbled names in the weak light. Suddenly he took a vicious swipe at the card, and it fluttered to the floor. It would be May, with no mishaps, before he could return to Cherokee Flats, and his mind wandered to the river, the open plains, and the rolling hills. He had just settled back on the cot when Crapper hollered, "You got some visitors, Savage. Get up and try looking happy." "Go to hell," Marcus growled suddenly. "You fool with me and you don't see nobody." I don't give a damn. Ain't nobody I want to see nohow. But by now the visitors were coming down the corridor. Right this way, Reverend, Crapper said. He spoke with an exaggerated politeness that forced a grunt of disgust from Marcus. The cell door swung open, and through it came Reverend Broadnap, Maggie Pullins, carrying a bag of fruit and candy, and Deacon Henry Fuller. Reverend Broadnap stepped over and touched Marcus on the shoulder. Marcus stiffened. He wanted to tell them to all go, but he held his tongue. We come to pray for you, and to wish you a Merry Christmas, son. Marcus didn't answer, and Broadnap turned to the others and said, Let's pray. O Almighty God, Broadnap began, we come to you on bended knee, praying for the soul of this young sinner. Marcus's muscles flexed, and his gaze shot defiantly to the tops of their heads, then to Crapper, who stood in the doorway with an evil grin on his face. Wash his black sins away in these white snows of your holy Christmas. Lighten the troubles he has brought to his young dark days. Bring peace to his tormented soul, and help him to someday leave this place a cleaner and better young man. Oh God, show him the light. Shut up! Shut up! Marcus shouted. And get the hell out of here. He was on his feet now. I don't want to hear none of your Uncle Tom praying over me. The three people rose, shocked beyond belief. You don't know what you're saying, boy, Broadnap half whispered, trying to quiet him down, reaching again toward his shoulder. I know much about what I'm saying as you do, he shot back, pulling away. Maggie put the bag of fruit on his bed. Broadnap took out a Sunday school card with a picture of Christ on it and placed it on the table. Here, read the scripture here on the back, son, he said, and pray to the Savior. He'll hear you. Marcus snatched the card, tore it in half, and threw it at the preacher. You and your white God get the hell out of here, he shouted. I don't want no part of you soul savers, bending down like Paul says you do, kissing the feet of a poor white trash God. Tears were in his eyes now. Look at Crapper there. He's white. Why don't you get down and start moaning and groaning to him so he can kick the crap out of you like he does all of us nigger boys? Yeah, that's what he calls us. Nigger, nigger, nigger. Tell him, Crapper. Tell him what you're going to do to me when they leave. Tell him. Son. But don't son me. Just get going. So Crapper can tease me about you niggers coming here to pray over me. Broadnap, Maggie, and Henry Fuller filed out, their heads shaking. Crapper slammed the door shut and followed them down the corridor. Marcus sat very still a while. Then suddenly he began to feel a deep sense of guilt, deeper than any he had ever felt in his whole life. He was bewildered. These people had come all the way to help him, and he had hurt them, saying things he didn't realize he could say. But what he had said was more for Crapper than for them, and he realized this. If Crapper hadn't stood in the door with that silly grin on his face, things might have been different. But it was too late now. The harm was done. Yet somehow he felt he had got a point across to Crapper. He didn't know just what. Maybe he was really defending those people against somebody like Crapper, who had once told him that all niggers are stupid and crazy. In a way, he was telling them that they weren't. That he was on to his kind and their lily white God. That his paw damned when he got drunk. He glanced up. Crapper was back. Marcus said nothing. Merry Christmas, nigger, Crapper said disdainfully, and turned back down the corridor. May had come. Booker Savage was slinging old automobile tires on his junk heap when a car stopped in front of his shack. He started to throw the last tire, then stopped at the sight of Marcus and a uniformed guard getting out of the car. He dropped the tire and walked toward them. Marcus spoke first. "Hi, Paul." "Hi there, boy." Booker pulled a cigar butt from his pocket and lit it. "I didn't know you was coming home today. Nobody told me." "You is Paul?" the guard asked. "That's right." "Okay, you got to sign these papers on this line." He handed Booker a form and a pencil. "Well, what's this for?" "To show we turned him over to you. Sign it right here." Booker took the paper and marked an X where the guard indicated. "Hell, that ain't no signature," the guard said. "He can't write," Marcus explained. "That's his legal way of signing." The guard grunted, took the paper and pencil back, got into the car and drove off. Marcus turned and watched the car turning away in a cloud of dust. "Well, I'm glad I won't be looking him in the face tomorrow morning," he said. Then he turned back to his father, and they looked at each other without speaking for a moment. "Well, come on, boy. Ain't much here to eat, but I'll stir up something." Marcus picked up a small battered bag, and they went into the shack. Booker cooked some oatmeal and poured some molasses over it. Then he piled cold biscuits on the table, and they began to eat. "Now, how'd they treat you up there, boy?" "Like a dog." "Well, I meant to come up and see you, but things got busy around here." "Yeah, I know." "Well, you're glad to be back, ain't you?" "Anybody'd be glad to get out of that stinking hole." "They beat up on you?" Marcus didn't answer. Instead, he parted his coarse hair and revealed a long scar, a memento of Charlie Crapper's billy club. Then he turned his head and pulled down his shirt collar. There was an ugly raw scab on his shoulder. "I'm going to kill one of them puckerwoods sure as hell one of these days," Booker muttered. Marcus remained silent, spooning in the last of the oatmeal. Booker stirred uneasily on his chair, not knowing what more to say. Suddenly Marcus stopped chewing. His jaws began quivering, and he let out a guttural cry, spewing the food from his mouth over the table. "Well, what's the matter, boy? What's the matter?" Booker was up and over him now. "You hurting or something? What's the matter?" Then, as if escaping some unforeseen doom, Marcus jumped up and ran from the house through the junk-strewn paths toward Flynn's River. He didn't stop sobbing until he lay on its banks, watching the river flow past slowly. He was free again, but his homecoming had left him nearly as empty and as frustrated as he had been during his imprisonment. He rolled over and propped himself against a tree. His hand felt the time-worn sides of a pebble. It was smooth and cool, and sort of soothing to the touch. He rubbed it over his hot face, up his jaw, and stuck the point of it into his right ear. He pushed a finger into his other ear, cutting off all sound. He was deaf to the world. "Aye!" The harsh voice came as familiar to them as a dog's bark. They turned as one in their surprise. "Hi, Marcus. Hello there. What'd he say?" "Thought you guys forgot me." "Didn't you get the Christmas card we sent you?" Newt asked. "Yeah," Beansy said. "We all signed it and Newt mailed it. Didn't you, Newt?" "Yeah, I sure did," Newt admitted. "Sent it 2 days before Christmas." "Well, I didn't get no card," Marcus lied. "That's funny," Newt said. "I sure sent it." "You calling me a liar, Winger?" "I ain't calling you anything. I just said I sent a card, and I did." "And I'm saying I didn't get it. Now one of us is lying." Newt kept still. "I said one of us is lying, Winger." Okay, so one of us is lying. "You ready to say which?" "Oh, come on, let's go," Beansy said. Newt was as eager as Beansy to go, but pride held him to the spot. "Now, I ain't for no trouble, Marcus, but I ain't for no running either. Now, that's for sure." "Here comes Pete," Jappy said almost gleefully. The words fell on Newt's ears like a blessing, giving him courage. He looked at Marcus squarely for the first time. He thought he still might have to fight him, even if Pete was coming. but he knew Marcus would have to fight fair with Pete around. "And I'll see you guys later, especially you, Winger," Marcus snarled, starting off. "Well, what's going on, fellas?" Pete asked. "Oh, nothing much," Newt answered, his eyes still on Marcus. Pete sensed the situation. "I'm glad to see you back, Marcus." "Yeah?" Marcus grunted. He turned and he eyed Pete. "Yep, I am. And I think the fellas here would be too if you just let 'em." "Well, I ain't caring about what none of you feel." Pete turned to Newt, Beansy, and Jappy. "You guys go on home. I'll see you later, Newt." The three boys slung their books over their shoulders and walked off. Pete turned back to Marcus. "You going my way?" "Nope." "Okay," Pete said, and started off. After a few steps, he stopped and came back. "Marcus, the whole world ain't against you like you think. We all know how tough you had it. We know it ain't been very easy for you, but you get into trouble again and you're going to land right back up there, and you know it. Why don't you get a job someplace and make a good start this time?" Marcus's eyes widened. "A job? Where am I going to get a job? Ain't no place in town where they'll even let me come in the door except Chappie's." Pete thought for a moment. "Why don't you ask Chappie for a job?" "Doing what?" "I don't know. Washing dishes, sweeping or something." "Why are you so anxious to help me?" "I ain't exactly so happy to help you. I need a job about bad as you." "Yeah, but you're the son of church-going people, and they wouldn't like you working there, would they? But it's okay for me, huh?" "Well, in a way, I guess you're right. But if you want me to, I'll talk to Chappie about you." "I don't need no help from the likes of you." Pete looked at him for a moment. "Well, I'm going to talk to Chappie about giving you a job. You can go see him if you want to. If you don't, there won't be no skin off my hide." Pete turned and walked across the street and around the corner. Crossing an alley, he entered Chappie Logan's through the back. Marcus stood looking after him. Chappie wouldn't be so bad, he thought. Better than nothing. At least I won't have to eat that garbage paw slings together. A little later, he saw Pete come back and go around the corner. He kept out of sight until Pete was gone. Then he went hesitantly in the direction of Chappie's. "Hey, you coming quicker than I thought," Chappie said, as he waddled around the room with several bottles of corn liquor under his fat arms. "Pete Winger says you want a job. Do you or don't you?" "I wish he'd tend to his own business instead of mine." "Oh, Pete's a good boy, mighty good boy. Pay you listen a little bit to him." "I ain't listened to none of his holy talk." Chappie set the bottles on the table. "Look, now, I ain't got a lot of time. You want a job or not?" "Doing what?" "What I want you to do, that's what." "What kind of pay do I get?" $5 a week in grub when you're working." Marcus looked about the empty room. The crooked booths reminded him of cattle stalls, and the murky windows and the mirrors hadn't been washed for years. The odor of stale smoke and alcohol hung in the air like an invisible mist. "Well, okay, I'll take it," he said. The following Saturday morning, Pete, without explaining why, got Newt up rather early. "How'd you like to do a little boxing this morning?" Newt looked surprised. "Boxing with you?" "Yeah, with me." So right after breakfast, Pete took Newt behind the hen house and gave him his first serious lessons in self-defense, teaching him to lead with the left, feint with the right, double jab with the left, send home the damaging right, and roll away, keeping balance with the left foot forward. That's it. Feint. Come on, 2 left jabs. Cock the right. Feint. Jab again. Throw the right. Newt swung the right hard. "Try again. You miss. Come on. Left, right, feint. Jab. Left, right, feint. Throw it." Newt aimed for Pete's chin, but the blow never reached its target. Newt grunted as the wind shot out of his mouth. Pete's big fist had crashed into his midsection, caving him in. "Ooh, hold it a minute. I'm out of breath." "I'll let that be a lesson to you," Pete said. "Don't ever forget to cover your gut. Keep your elbows lower when you come in for the kill. And the rest of that month, Newt worked hard on the art of self-defense. "You're coming all right," Pete confided about 2 weeks later. "Keep it up, and I have to get a few lessons someplace myself." To Newt, this was like receiving a high school diploma from Pete. For Pete, though he wasn't a bully, had gained a lot of respect for this fish through the years. "Pete don't ever pick a fight, but he don't ever lose one," Jack Winger was quick and proud to tell anyone who misconstrued his son's easygoing manner. Graduation came on a most beautiful night in June. Later that night, Newt and his girl Arcella walked home behind their families, and Newt said shyly, I'd like to take you someplace for some ice cream if your mama would let you." "Well, let's catch up and see," Arcella said. They caught up at the next corner and got permission. Pete slipped Newt 50 cents before they took off across the tracks to Sampson's drugstore. Most of the graduates from the white junior high school were there when they went in. They were jammed around the soda fountain, in the booths, and on the floor. Newt made his way to the counter and ordered 2 banana splits. "To take out?" the soda jerk asked. "2 banana splits," Newt repeated. The soda jerk gave him a distrustful glance, but he turned and dished up the splits on cardboard plates. "Now, here you are," he hollered above the noise. 30 cents. Newt gave him 3 dimes and turned away, his face burning with embarrassment, his whole evening beginning to hint of a bad dream. "Come on, Arcella, let's go." "Newt! Newt Winger!" It was Waldo Newhall and his girl. They were sitting at a table, still in cap and gown. "Congratulations on your graduation," Walt shouted. "Come sit down with us." "Oh, I'd like to, Waldo, but we gotta be going." "Oh, come on," Winger said, nudging Arcella into the seat beside his date. "Kate, this is Arcella Jefferson. You know Newt." "Yeah, we know each other," Newt said, "but look, Waldo, we can't sit here with you like this." Waldo was beside himself with gaiety. "Who says you can't? This is a free country, Winger. Sit down. Come on now." Well, maybe it'll work, Newt thought, with a white boy inviting us to sit with him. He decided to try it. "Oh, okay," he said shakily. Things went well for a few minutes, then Newt saw Bert Sampson, the owner, making his way through the crowd, and his heart sank. Bert came up to the table and tapped Newt on the shoulder. "Okay, buddy. You and your girl will have to finish eating outside. I'm sorry." "What do you mean?" Waldo said. "These are friends of mine." "Then go outside and eat with them if they're such good friends of yours." "I ain't going anywhere," Waldo snapped. "And they ain't either. We paid for this slop, and we're going to eat it here, right here." "Oh, forget it," Waldo, Newt said. "We're going to a party anyway." The place was dead quiet now. "Come on, Arcella." "So long, Kate." "So long, Waldo." Neither of them answered. Kate turned and looked up at Bert Sampson. "You big slob," she said. Bert looked at her suddenly, but he didn't answer. "You big slob," she repeated. Bert turned and walked back to the end of the counter. Newt jerked the door open, and they went out, walking briskly to the corner as if they had really some place to go. They stood there on the curb under the lamplight for a few minutes. "Oh, Newt," Arcella began to cry. It's okay, Newt said, putting his arms around her. "It's okay. We'll show 'em someday." He threw the remains of his banana split on the sidewalk. Arcella smiled and did the same. Then they walked slowly, arm in arm, to the tracks, across them and into the darkness of their side of town. Newt's guidance teacher at the high school was Miss McClincoch, who taught English and American history. She was a large, full-bosomed, red-haired woman with a long nose who wore black crepe dresses and high-laced shoes. There were no shenanigans in her room, and Newt found out soon enough that anyone coming to her class without homework properly done paid rather dearly. For such a misdemeanor, she made Newt stay an hour after school 3 evenings in a row. "Now, what are your ambitions, Newton?" she asked just before he left on the last day of punishment. Newt looked up, surprised at the suddenness of the question. Ambitions? Yes. Ambitions, Miss McClincoch repeated. Haven't you ever thought what you'd like to do when you leave high school? Oh, yes, and of course, I'd like to go to college. College? She spoke as if he had said an obscene word. Are you serious? Yes, ma'am. Well, what does your father do? Where does he work? Newt began rubbing his hands nervously. Oh, odd jobs mostly, and we raise corn every year. Your brother Pete attended this school, didn't he? Yes, ma'am. Did he go to college? No, ma'am. Why not? I don't really know. Well, I'll tell you why. For the same reason that 90% of the Negro students don't go to college. They just aren't college material, she said bluntly. The few who are, and are lucky enough to get the money, usually wind up as cooks and porters anyway. Newt felt his anger mounting, but he kept quiet. Now that, I feel, Miss McClincoch went on, is going to a lot of trouble just to become a servant. Well, I won't become anybody's servant. College or no college, Newt shot back. Now, don't become angered, Newton. I'm your guidance teacher. I'm here to advise what is best for you. Now, you had best take a general course next year instead of a college preparatory. It will be easier for you and much wiser. Newt looked Miss McClincoch straight in the eye. I don't understand you, he said finally. Well, you will someday, she said archly. Am I excused now? Newt asked. You're excused, she said. As the days went by, the relationship between Newt and Miss McClincoch became considerably worse. He got his homework done, and it was acceptable, but she never asked questions of him. And though he thought he deserved a B on the midterm test in October, he received a C. He went to see her about this one evening, asking her bluntly why he didn't get a higher mark. Are you telling me how to grade, young man? No, ma'am, I'm not. I just think I should have got a higher mark. Well, there seems to be some difference between what you thought and what you got, doesn't there? Newt felt the anger rising again. He decided he had better leave, and he started for the door. Now, you come back here. Don't you dare walk out of here without asking to be excused. Do you hear me? Come back here this minute. Newt stopped and faced Miss McClincoch. And he said what he had been waiting to say for a long time. You know one thing? You don't like me or any of the rest of the colored kids. I found out you told my sister and brother the same thing you told me, that we'd wind up porters and maids. And you've been telling all the other kids the same thing for years and years. That's why they always make you their guidance teacher, and you shut your filthy mouth. And we all hate you, every last one of us. Why, you impudent thing, you're going before Mr. Hall next week. I'll see to that. You wait and see how... Newt stormed from the room and slammed the door. On Monday, when the lunch bell sounded, Newt headed straight for the principal's office, expecting the worst. I might even be expelled, he thought. Mr. Hall, a rather youngish, open-faced man, wearing steel-rimmed glasses, leaned back in his swivel chair when Newt entered. Miss McClincoch sat beside his desk, her fat hands resting firmly on her knees. How do you do, sir? Newt said. Hello, Newton. Sit down there, Mr. Hall ordered. Newt sat down, and Mr. Hall twirled his chair in half circles for a few seconds before he spoke again. Now, Miss McClincoch tells me you were rude and impudent last Friday. What have you to say for yourself? Well, it's just that Miss McClincoch and I, had a little fuss, or I don't know whether you call it a fuss or not, but we didn't see things the same way after the first week or so. Now, Miss McClincoch happens to be your instructor as well as your guidance teacher. I know, sir, but I don't like the way she wanted to guide me. Mr. Hall made a few more half-turns, scratching his head. And this caused you to tell Miss McClincoch that you hated her? I didn't say I did alone. I said all the colored kids hated you, and they do. She tells them all the same thing, that they shouldn't go to college, that they're all going to turn out to be porters and cooks and maids. A frown came on Hall's face. Is this true, Miss McClincoch? Do you tell the Negro students such things? Mr. Hall, you've been at this school for just 2 years. Now, I've been class advisor to these colored students for the last 20 years. What I've said to them was what I've been instructed to say to them. Now, just a moment, Miss McClincoch. Just a moment. Newt, wait in the order office till I call for you. Newt got up and went out. Then Mr. Hall rose and shut the door behind him. As he sat there on the bench, Newt began trying to imagine the conversation as it would go between Mr. Hall and Miss McClincoch. He wondered, as he had often done before, what the whites' real reasons were for denying them a part in the school's athletic and social affairs. Why does our color make such a difference? Didn't God know that we'd have a lot of trouble if he made us black? Well, since he's white, maybe he don't care either. He smiled wryly. I've never seen black angels. Even the chariot horses are white. He knotted his fists and watched the skin lighten under the pressure of the knuckle bones. Wonder if you tore all the skin off, if it would all come back black. I guess it would. I don't think I'd like being white anyway. The door to the principal's office opened, and Miss McClincoch bustled out past Newton into the hall. Come in, Winger, the principal said. Mr. Hall began very slowly, uncertainly. I just don't know. Well, this is all sort of an unnecessary mistake, or maybe a misunderstanding, Newt. For an explanation to make sense to you, or me, one would have to go much further back to a period, a tragic one, before you or I existed. Now, although she must share the blame for this awful wrong, Miss McClincoch is somewhat a victim herself, having been eased into this wrong channel of thought many years ago. Now, Mr. Hornsby was more to blame than she, but then so is my father, my mother, Miss McClincoch's father and mother, and millions of others who helped shape the ideas that Miss McClincoch so unwisely passed on to you, forgetting that time and progress must shake away such ideas. Now, frankly, I was shocked at Miss McClincoch's confession, but he shrugged, then paused for a second. The valedictorian of my graduating class at college was a Negro, Curtis Matthews. But do you want to know the ironic thing about this, Newt? Hall shook his head. When I came through the New York train station from a New England vacation last summer, there was Curtis Matthews, bearing out Miss McClincoch's prophecy, asking me if I would like help with my bags. He was a red cap, carrying bags for people who couldn't begin to compare with him in knowledge or social worth. What a waste, I thought, after I left him that day. Did he know you, Mr. Hall? Oh, yes, indeed. He stopped work, and we talked for nearly a half hour. Hall was quiet, remembering again. He had 7 children by then, Newt. I'll never forget it. A man with a master's degree, carrying bags with 7 children and no hope. They were both quiet for a moment. Well, now, Newt, there are some things here at my own school that I don't like, son. For instance, I feel badly about the school board's keeping you boys off our football and basketball teams. It's a stupid, costly thing. Believe me, if it were left to me or to Coach Dennison, this would stop. But we are powerless. Yes, sir. I understand. I hope you do. And another thing, what I've told you is strictly between us. I had a long talk with Miss McClincoch, and I'm sure her thinking and attitudes will be different from now on. You continue to work hard. She'll do the rest. Yes, sir. And if you have any more problems, bring them to me. You're excused." As Newt started out, he added, "And you are to show Miss McClincoch the highest respect. You understand, don't you?" "Yes, sir." "Thanks, Mr. Hall." "You're welcome." Newt arrived at the Kiner farm early the next Saturday morning. There was a note from Jake tacked to the barn door saying that he and his wife would be away until afternoon. Newt stuffed the note in his pocket, wishing now he had gone to see Pete riding the rodeo at Parsons. He cleaned tack for the first hour, then swept the floor and went out into the fields, hoeing weeds until nearly 12 o'clock. Finally, tired from the half-day's work, he swung the hoe to his shoulders and looked about for shelter in the burning sun. There was a tree close by, but he had found it too skimpy for shade, so he walked back to the barn, figuring to get a good hour's rest before Jake returned. He entered the barn, stood the hoe against a wall, and settled on a box. Then, changing his mind, he climbed the wooden ladder to the loft and stretched out in the hay. It took him several minutes to devour 2 sandwiches. Then he rolled over on his back and gazed idly at the ceiling until his eyelids got heavy, and before long he was fast asleep. More than 2 hours had passed when he sprang awake to a squeaking noise down on the floor beneath him. He scooted quietly to the edge of the loft and peeped below, fearing that Jake had discovered his absence. Then his breath caught in his throat. It wasn't Jake. It was Booker Savage, Marcus's father, and he was ripping the lock off the door to the room where Jake stored his applejack and peach brandy. Afraid of what Booker might do if he saw him, Newt just lay quiet and watched. The bottom hinge was loose now, and Booker wedged the crowbar under the top screws. With one powerful jerk, he wrenched the lock and hinges off, and they clattered to the floor. Then, hooking the crowbar on the back pocket of his overalls, he placed a gunny sack on the floor. Then he slipped into the dark room. Within seconds, Newt saw him loading pint bottles into the sack. Booker stopped at the sound of Jake's angry voice coming from the barn door. "You ain't getting 1 penny more out of me, Silas. Now get out of here, you drunken bum, before I throw you out." Silas Newhall staggered in after him. "I ain't leaving here till you pay me what's coming to me, you damned old pinch penny." Jake's face screwed up in anger, and he reached to the wall for his bullwhip. "Now I'm warning you for the last time to get out." "You don't scare me, you old son of a gun." Silas grabbed Newt's hoe as he yelled back, but before he could swing it, Jake stepped to one side and clotted him on the temple with the butt end of the whip. Silas fell unconscious to the floor. Jake had stumbled on the sack of bottles as he swung, and now, as he steadied himself, he saw the awesome figure of Booker Savage peering from the dark of the doorway. Bewildered, he paused for a moment with his mouth open. Then he snapped the whip and struck. Booker flinched and raised the crowbar. Jake drew back again, but before he could swing, the crowbar smashed against his head. He went down without uttering a sound. With the first blow, the beast seemed to have been loosed in Booker, and he smashed the crowbar time and time again into Jake's bloody head. Finally, Booker stood over the 2 forms on the floor, looking about, breathing heavily. Silas moaned. Booker stooped, pulled the whip from beneath Jake's arms, and beat the moan to a stillness. He dropped the whip by Silas's head and started away. Then he turned back. He picked up the crowbar and placed it in Silas's limp left hand, and after that he lifted the sack of bottles, stepped warily through the door, and fled across the field. Newt hadn't moved during the swift, brutal assault, and when he did, it was in a maze of nightmarish thought. He crawled to the back of the loft and pinned his eye to a crack in the wall boards, watching Booker make off into the nearby woods. Suddenly he knew he had to get out of there himself, and he started for the ladder. Then he stopped and crouched back, for Mary Kiner had appeared at the barn door. Catching sight of the farms lying in the shadows beyond the doorway, she stepped in further, an apprehensive look on her face. Then she threw up her hands and ran screaming toward the house. "Oh, my Lord! Oh, help! Help!" When she was gone, Newt clambered down the ladder, crept toward the door, glancing timorously at the two men sprawled like ragamuffins on the floor. He peeped out the door, burst through it, and loped over the furred earth toward home. By church time Sunday morning, the news of Jake Kiner's death and Silas Newhall's arrest had swept across languid Cherokee Flats like a storm. An uneasy calm lay over the Winger household while Sarah and Prissy spread the Sunday table. Uncle Rob, his heavy lids batting behind the dark glasses, sat in the shadow of the chimney pipe. Pete stood at the window, gazing into the distance, watching the slow turn of the weather vane atop the Kiner barn. Newt sat on the floor, his back propped against the sideboard, staring into space. And Jack leaned against the wall in a straight back chair, smoking his pipe. He was the first to break the silence. "There's a powerful sermon Broadnapp preached today, Rob." Rob's head lifted and his lids blinked even faster. "Yes, it was. Yes, it was. And his words about Jake sure touched the heart." He paused then and went on. "Jake was a good sort. A little cranky, maybe, but he did lots of good things, too. Like the time he donated the stained glass window for the church." The talk about Jake brought a new agitation to Newt, and he began rocking back and forth in little inconsistent rhythms. Sarah entered the room and placed a platter of chicken on the table, and Prissy followed with hot bread and vegetables. Jack took his brother Rob by the arm and led him to his seat at the table. Jack stuffed a napkin in the collar of his white shirt. "I declare," he said, "I can't for the life of me understand how Silas Newhall could do such a thing." "Oh, well, whiskey will make a man do a lot of things," Rob said. "Got Silas over to jail?" Sarah asked. "Well, from what I hear, he's at the hospital. He's pretty well banged up himself." Jack chomped the white off of a scallion. "Well, I'm sure glad it wasn't a colored man who done it," he said. "It'd be trouble sure enough." "Silas will probably get life, won't he, Papa?" Pete said. "Oh, I don't see how I can escape it. Seems to me they got him dead to rights. Found him laying right alongside Jake, drunk as a loon." Rob's face lifted before he spoke, and Newt could see the whole table reflected in the black lenses. "Well, they still have to prove he's guilty. You never can tell. You never can tell till it's all over." The next morning, as Marcus peeped into the icebox, Booker staggered in holding a half-empty bottle of peach brandy. "You ain't going to find nothing to chaw on in that thing. Ain't even no ice in it." Marcus spoke without looking up at his father. "I'm so hungry I could eat the bark off a tree." Booker grunted, lifted the bottle to his mouth, took 2 hefty swallows, and wiped his lips with the back of his wrist. "Well, unless you spend that dollar you was showing off when Kirky was here, you better start skinning that big cottonwood outside the house. It's got plenty of bark on it." He grunted again and turned back toward the bedroom. "Pa, where'd you get all that booze you got hid out in that shed?" "What booze you talking about, boy?" "That booze in them green bottles in the gunny sack that was under this mattress. Just like that bottle you got in your hand. What you been stooping around like a filthy black cat for? You spying on me or something?" "I wasn't snooping. I wanted the mattress to sleep on. You was hollering all night, so I went out to the shed to get it, and come across all them bottles. Ain't none of your business where I got it. You just keep your damn trap shut, or I'll put my fist in it." His body trembled under the fury of his threat. Marcus eyed the bottle in his father's grasp. "Okay, Pa. I guess you know what you're doing, but if you don't, you better ask somebody. And you know well as I do, ain't too many around here hanking for your asking. What you getting at, boy?" "I'm trying to say if you got in some kind of trouble, you ought to tell me about it. I'm your son, ain't I?" Well, I had to take your maw's word for that, boy. Marcus bristled. Why, He weighed his chances against a burly 250 pounds, and he decided against finishing the sentence. Instead, he stood looking at Booker, feeling a hatred that even he thought himself incapable of possessing. All at once he shuddered. He burst into a frantic sob and lunged toward his father with both fists flying, expecting to go down under a hail of blows and really not caring. But Booker just grabbed him about the waist and held him as if he were in a vice. Simmer down, boy, simmer down. He had become unexpectedly contrite. I'm sorry about saying such a thing. Honest, boy, I'm sorry. Gradually, he released his hold and Marcus stood free, stunned at the first kind words he could ever remember his father speaking to him. You think I killed old Jake, don't you, boy? Marcus was silent. Well, boy, I did kill him. I didn't mean to. But he caught me breaking in this place, and it was my only way out. And he hit me with that damn whip, same as he did you. You believe me, boy? Yeah. That's our secret, ain't it, boy? Don't be forgetting I'm your old man. You could get us both in trouble around here. You know that, don't you? Yep. Can I depend on you? Yep. It's a good boy. Good boy. His hand went toward his son's shoulder, but Marcus avoided it and went out the door. Where you going, boy? Over to the bakery for some stale buns. Attaboy, attaboy. Marcus? Yeah. Get a little coffee on your way back, huh? Okay. Okay. Booker watched his son turn from the front path into the road. He rubbed his stubby chin in a moment of thought. He gulped another mouthful of brandy and returned to his greasy palate. A grand jury indicted Silas for the murder of Jacob Elijah Kiner, and he spent the rest of June and all of July in the county jail at Fort Miles. During the first week of August, he was brought back to Cherokee Flats to stand trial. The prosecuting attorney was Stuart McCormick, a flamboyant, portly, white-maned lawyer from Fort Miles. The defense was to be carried by Harley Davis, a red-haired young man from Cherryvale. Hear ye, hear ye, court is now in session, the bailiff bawled. The Honorable Justice Jefferson Kavanaugh presiding. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the state of Kansas has charged the defendant, Silas Newhall, with the first-degree murder of Jacob Kiner. The state will now call its witnesses. McCormick was up, a look of confidence on his face. Yes, Your Honor. Will Officer Jason Kirky please take the stand? Yes, sir. Kirky got up gingerly and strode toward the witness stand. As he stepped up, he stumbled, and a faint laughter flitted through the courtroom. He stood up straight, raised his hands, and was sworn in. Now, Officer Kirky, you visited the scene of the crime immediately after it was committed, didn't you? Yes, sir, I did. Well, what did you find when you arrived? Well, Jake was lying in a pool of blood, and Silas there was sprawled out and moaning something like crazy-like. I shook him, but he didn't make no sense at all, just kept moaning. Well, did he have anything in his hand or close to his person, resembling the weapon we have there on the table before the court? Oh, that crowbar that's laying there. It was laying under Silas's hand when I got there, and the door of the little room where old Jake kept his peach brandy and stuff was yanked off the hinges. Now, Officer Kirky, was the crowbar used for breaking into the room the same as the one used as a murder weapon? Well, the grooves on the wood that was smashed, they fit the same size crowbar. I found that much. Well, that's all for now, Officer Kirksey. Thank you. The trial droned on, and on Thursday night of the second week, Newt tossed about in his bed, trying to fight off the secret weighing so heavily upon him. 3 o'clock came, and though Newt closed his eyes against the night, his thoughts boiled on. A man's whole life is at stake. But if I tell the truth, a lot more people might get killed. Even some of us right here in this house. He continued rolling and thinking. It was 4:30 by the time he decided to lift the weight from his shoulders, and he went through the darkness to his mother's room. He touched her gently on the shoulder. "Mama?" She stirred slightly and rolled over toward Jack, who snored like a foghorn. "Who's that?" "It's me, Newt, Mama." "And what's the matter, boy? You having bad dreams?" "Oh, it's a lot worse than that." Sarah was sitting up right now. "Well, come here and sit down by me." "What's troubling you, son?" Newt sank to the bed and started telling his story. "Oh, wait a minute," his mother said. "We better get out to the living room. We don't want to wake your pop up." She arose and wrapped a blanket about her, and they went in and sat together on the divan. Newt, his mind unraveling like a ball of yarn, poured out the nightmare hurriedly, as if he couldn't wait to rid himself of it. When he was finished, the two of them just sat there until dawn without saying any more to each other. When Jack awoke later, Sarah told him Newt's story, and the three of them decided that nothing further was to be said until Sarah talked with Judge Kavanaugh. For years she had been the judge's housekeeper. Now she told him just before he sat down to breakfast, "This is fantastic, Sarah. Do you think the boy's really telling the truth?" "Well, I know he is. I know he is," she sighed. "Does anyone besides you and Jack know about this?" "No, no one." Good, good. Now, Sarah, this is a ticklish situation. As a judge trying this case, it would be improper for me to divulge this information. You must do it. Sarah telephoned Harley, and he asked her to come to his place at 8. Later, the attorney sat facing her, Newt and Jack, finding it difficult to believe what he was hearing. During the full 20 minutes of Newt's story, he took notes and asked Newt to repeat now and then. "Well, why didn't you come forth with this information before, Newt?" "I was afraid. Afraid that there might be a lot of trouble between the colored and white people if they found out Mr. Savage did it." "I understand," Harley said. "I think I know how you felt." He looked at the boy long and hard. "Will you be willing to repeat what you've told me in court tomorrow morning, Newt?" He looked to his mother, and she answered for him. "He'll be there tomorrow morning, and so will my husband and me." "Fine, fine, fine." Harley was on his feet. "This is going to make all the difference, all the difference." The moment Newt made his appearance in the courtroom the next morning, Harley beamed. Silas sat gloomily beside him, unaware of the turn of events. Jack Winger leaned close to Newt, whispering, "Are you all set, boy?" "Yes, sir." Newt was looking away as he answered, his face gone ashen. His heart constricted at the sight of Booker and Marcus Savage sitting unperturbed in the middle of the room. "What's the matter, boy?" "Booker and Marcus are here." "Are you sure?" "Yes, sir. Right in the center there." "Well, I'll declare." Court convened at 11 sharp, and after what seemed like an eternity to Newt, Jeff called out, "The counsel for the defense may now present evidence and witnesses." "Will Newton Winger please take the stand?" Newt found himself repeating after the bailiff, "To tell the truth and nothing but the truth, so help me God." He asked strength of something, be it God or whatever, to carry him, his family, and the rest of the colored people safely through the trouble he now imagined his testimony would bring. "Would you give the court your full name, Newt?" Newton Buchanan Winger. How old are you, Newton? 15 in November. Did you know Jacob Kiner, the deceased? Yes, sir, I did. Did you ever work for him? Yes, sir. What kind of work did you do for him? Oh, hoeing, weeding, picking fruit, stuff like that. Well, when did you last work for him? On June 14th. How long did you work that day, Newt? Well, I was supposed to work from 8 to 5, but it was too hot, so I went inside the barn and I went to sleep. Where in the barn did you sleep? Up in the hayloft. Booker Savage flinched. Did you wake up naturally, or did something wake you up, or someone? Well, I woke up when I heard some noise downstairs. Somebody was ripping off the door to where Mr. Kiner kept his peach brandy and cider and stuff. Silas was now leaning forward in his seat, his mouth agape, following every word. Well, what happened then? Mr. Kiner and Mr. Newhall came through the door fussing at each other. Then Mr. Kiner got real mad, and he hit Mr. Newhall over the head with his whip handle, and Mr. Newhall grabbed a hoe, but Mr. Kiner hit him, and he went down before he could get a blow in. When Mr. Kiner stepped back after hitting Mr. Newhall, he saw this other man, and he started hitting him with a whip too. But the other man raised a crowbar, and he got him across the head, and he kept hitting Mr. Kiner on the head after he fell down. Now, Newt, I want you to tell the court why you didn't come forth with this information before. Oh, I was scared, that's all. Scared of what? Well, I don't know. I guess I was scared of what the people might do. I thought it might bring on some kind of race trouble. I see. Now, Newton, I want you to look carefully around this room and tell the court if you see this man. The one who broke into the room and then beat Mr. Kiner and Mr. Newhall. Newt saw his mother's eyes on him, demanding the truth. His own eyes shifted, and every head in the room turned and followed his gaze until it rested on Booker Savage. That's the man. There in the red shirt. It's him, Mr. Booker Savage. The crowd began mumbling, and Booker sprang up. He's lying! He's lying! He's lying! Newt closed his eyes, trying to shut out the scene from his mind. All the things he'd seen before him, the faces, the walls, floor, ceiling, all floated in a jumble of gray nothing. He was limp with fear. But he was free now, free to meet violence if need be, as he had met the truth without guilt smothering his conscience. Get that nigger killers! Order! Order! Newt was told to step down. He opened his eyes, stepped off the stand, and rejoined his mother and father on the other side of the courtroom. Your Honor, Harley said quietly, the defense requests that this man, Booker Savage, take the stand. Officer Kirky, escort Mr. Savage to the stand, the judge commanded. Kirky stepped gingerly into the aisle where Booker sat and motioned for him. Booker got up. He patted Marcus on the knee and moved his big frame into the aisle. Lynch that black bastard! Kill him! Booker flinched at the shots and whirled around. Newt gritted his teeth and shut his eyes again. Order! Order! Jeff was shouting, banging his gavel. I want the persons who... He didn't have a chance to finish his words, for just in front of him, Kirky was sinking to the floor from a swift, powerful, left-handed punch that Booker had shot at his chin. And somehow Booker had grabbed the gun from Kirky's right holster. There were screams, and Booker shouted, I'll kill anybody who tries touches me. I'm getting out of here, Judge, right through your chambers. He swung his legs over the railing, brandishing the weapon nervously toward the spectators. You won't get away with it, Savage. Put that gun down. Nothing's going to happen to you. You just get back. I'll plug you too, Judge. Then he leaped through the door and slammed it behind him. The crowd was on its feet. Then Kirky jumped up. He whipped out his other gun and a bunch of keys and leapt over the railing. Now a bunch of whites were pressing forward. Lynch him! Kill him! String the black bastard up! Oh, my God, it started, Newt said to himself. I knew it would happen. Cherokee fished about for a key in the ring. Finding the right one, he twisted in the lock. Then he holstered his gun and started waving the crowd back. Hold it, he shouted. He's trapped. The door to the outside is locked, too. Now, you just hold it. Get back. Oh, no, let's get the bastard. Quiet, quiet, Jeff hollered. Back to your seats. Order, order. A shot rang out from inside the judge's chambers. Several women screamed. Cherokee, his gun still drawn, slowly twisted the key in the lock. Stand back, he cautioned. Then, standing sideways, the gun pointed, he eased the door open and peeped in. Booker Savage lay mortally wounded, a bullet hole in his temple. In a few moments, he was dead. Marcus rushed up, pushed by the judge, and went in. For a while, he stood looking down on his father, then he began sobbing. Jeff Kavanaugh shook his head and closed the door. When he was back on the bench, he waited until everyone was seated, then he rapped his gavel several times. Quiet was finally restored, and he said, "Stay with him, Officer Cherokee." Then he turned to McCormick. "I think it's your move, Consul." Stuart McCormick rose, and in an extremely low voice said, "Your Honor, in view of what has taken place here before us, I think it no more than proper to withdraw all charges against the defendant, Silas Newhall, if the court will permit." "The court will permit," Jeff answered sternly. "I now order the defendant released, and this case is closed, but let me say this. A man lies dead at the feet of his son in this room behind us. And you, who hollered for his life a few minutes ago, have your wish. You are as much or more responsible for his death as he himself. In less than 5 incredible minutes, you judged him and screamed for his black life because you assumed he had killed a white man, forgetting in your senseless moment that a black boy had just saved a white man's life right here before you. You pulled the trigger. You sent the bullet tearing through his brain, and this moment should haunt your minds forever. Now go home and pray to Almighty God that you be forgiven for your sin." The crowd rose quietly, turned and headed out. Marcus Savage emerged from the judge's chambers and stood stiffly by the door. Then he moved away, walking slowly toward the exit. Newt intercepted him. "I'm sorry, Marcus." "Yeah? You're sorry, huh?" They stood eyeing each other in the cold silence for a few moments. "Come on, son," Jack said finally, and Newt turned away. Jack! What is it, Sarah?" We'd better... She couldn't finish the sentence, and she was slumping toward the floor. Jack caught her in time, lifted her up, and laid her on a bench. "Run, get Doc Cravens, Newt, fast as you can. She's fainted." Sarah had lapsed into a complete coma by the time they finally got her home to bed. Doc Craven stayed in the bedroom with her for more than an hour. When he came out, he took Jack aside. "I hate telling you this, Jack," he said, "but I don't think she's going to make it this time. It's a severe heart attack. She should have never attended that trial. Yeah, with that boy on the stand, you couldn't keep her away. You know that, Timothy." That evening, Prissy sent telegrams to her brothers and sisters and her cousin Pilot. Bitterness, fed by frustration and loneliness, ate deeper into the soul of Marcus Savage. 2 days after his father's death, he had stood by himself as they lowered the body into a pauper's grave on the far side of Candy Hill. Mag Pullins, Deacon Fuller, Chappie Logan, and Reverend Broadnap stood in the background watching. Broadnap had offered to say some last words, but Marcus had told the undertaker, "I don't want nobody praying over my old man. Nobody." And Broadnap, respecting his wishes, did his praying silently as the cheap box disappeared beneath the earth. "Okay, Chappie, let's get going," Marcus said. He brushed by the others as if they weren't there and made for Chappie's big Dodge. Chappie turned and waddled behind him. "Hey, boy, don't you think you ought to say something to those people who was kind enough to come? I didn't ask them to come, did I? But, boy, you ought to hell with them. If you don't want to ride me back home, I'll walk. Get in, boy, get in." As the others made their way back to the undertaker's car, Mag Pullins moaned, "What can you do for a boy like that?" No one had an answer. Chappie and Marcus drove along without speaking. "I'm all by myself now," Marcus was thinking. "Ain't a soul caring if I live or die." Then he said aloud, "I know one thing. I'm going to get that Winger bastard." Chappie gave him a quick glance. "Oh, come on. You're doing all right now. Don't go fooling around and get yourself in a lot of trouble. He's the cause of my old man's being in that grave right now. Take my advice, boy, and stay out of trouble. You want to stay at my place tonight?" They had turned off the highway. "No, I reckon not." "You're welcome to, you know. I want to get home. I got a lot of thinking to do for myself." Chappie was quiet after that. They drove on the last few blocks and stopped in front of the Savage shack. "Want tomorrow off?" Chappie asked. "No, I'll be in early." Marcus got out of the car, slammed the door, and walked off. Chappie sat watching him. Suddenly Marcus stopped and turned around. "Thanks," he said gruffly. Newt was undressing for bed when Pete called. "Mama wants you, Newt." "Is something wrong?" "Oh, she's just asking for you. You better come right away." Newt walked slowly to the bedside. He sensed the others in the room, but he looked only at his mother, noting the sunken cheeks, the pallor lying like silk over her deep brown skin, the dullness of her eyes beneath the half-closed lids. She smiled faintly. "Come close, son." Then she closed her eyes. And Doc Cravens pressed a damp cloth against her forehead. He propped an extra pillow behind her neck and took her pulse. Randy, Lou, Clara, Prissy, Roy, and Pete stood off to the side. Jack was in front of them, his smokeless pipe hanging from his lips. The rims of his eyes were swollen and red. Doc Cravens touched Newt's shoulder. "She's sleeping now, son," he said. "You better get to bed." At the parlor door, Newt turned for one more look, then went off to his room. Lying in the darkness of his room, he began absorbing the full measure of the tragedy now facing the Winger family. It had already been decided on that Prissy would go with either Lou or Clara, as he would. He began thinking of his family as a shrinking tree. His mother, part of the trunk, was withering away. His brothers and sisters, like leaves, would soon scatter in all directions. He tossed and turned in his bed. He got up twice for water and made a trip to the outhouse. It was nearly 3 when he finally slept, and his dreams were as frightful as his day had been. "Newt? Newt, wake up." "Who is it? What you want?" He could just make out Clara's dark form above him. "It's me. Sister Clara." "Well, what's the matter?" "Newt," she said softly. "Yeah?" "Mama's dead." Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. From dust we came, and to dust we returneth. The petals of the broken rose fell from Pastor Broadnap's fingers, twisted and dipped into blurred confusion before Newt's tear-filled eyes, then came to rest on Sarah Winger's coffin. May this beloved mother and wife rest forever in peace. May God have mercy on this family. Amen. Newt felt his Uncle Rob's hand ease to his shoulder, pressing home the end of the rites. Grief engulfed him as he stood staring into his mother's open grave. "Goodbye, Mama." "Come on, son, let's go," Rob said. "Okay, Uncle Rob. I just want to stay a little longer." "It's all right, boy. Take your time." A warm, gentle breeze licked his ear. He turned at its touch and took Rob's hand, and they walked away. As he neared the car, he noticed two workmen sitting beneath a giant oak tree. Picks and shovels lay at their sides, and they were eating from tin lunch pails. Grave diggers. They'll be covering Mama as soon as we leave. The thought began overpowering him, and he screamed inside. He hurried Rob the last few yards to the car. He helped him in beside his father and slammed the door. "Everything all right, boy?" Jack asked. "Yes, sir, Papa. Everything's all right now." The big black funeral limousine moved slowly through the huge wrought iron gate. It turned onto the highway and rolled smoothly into high gear. Newt heard its tires singing on the hot macadam, drowning out the stifling silence of anguish and sorrow. He closed his eyes and his thoughts, slumped down into the seat, and completely surrendered his body to the car's gentle, surging motion. Marcus had an armful of dirty sheets when he saw Newt and Benji from the second-story window at Chappie's. He must be heading for the river, he thought. Now's my chance. He dropped the sheets and walked casually but swiftly down the stairs. He saw the back of Chappie, who was sprawled in a big chair talking to the cook. He moved quietly past the big bar, entered Chappie's room, and opened the drawer in which the gun was hidden. He broke it open and eyed the breech. It held one bullet. He shoved the revolver into his pocket and, feeling for more ammunition, upended the shirts. Finally, his hand struck one bullet lying on the very bottom. He dropped it in beside the gun and kept hunting, but to no avail. As he attempted to straighten out the shirts, a stack of loose bills slid out of one of the sleeves. "Damn," Marcus whispered. He fingered the money quickly. "Must be $200 here. Enough to get any place in the world on." As he crammed the bills into his back pocket, one peeled off and fluttered to the floor. He closed the drawer and crept into the barroom, then slipped out the front door and headed toward the river. Chappie got up and looked through the door. "Seems like I heard somebody come in out there," he said to the cook. He looked around the room and up the stairs. "Savage? You up there?" He wobbled over to the foot of the stairs. "Savage, you working?" Chappie wearily climbed the stairs, the boards creaking under his tremendous weight. "Savage! Savage!" he called out angrily, seeing the sheets lying on the floor. He went back downstairs and crossed to his room. "Savage!" He saw the $10 bill on the floor, and his eyes shifted to the drawer. He pulled it open, seeing the ruffled shirts. His hand felt for the money, then the gun. "Well, that bastard!" He grabbed his hat and started out the door. Then he called to the cook. "Potsy, I'm going over to the jail. Watch out till I get back." He piled into the car and shot off over the tracks. He met Kirky coming out of the door and told him about the theft. "Where is he now?" Kirky asked. "How'd I know?" Chappie said heatedly. "Probably going trying to shoot that Winger kid before he skips out." "Probably right," Kirky agreed. "See if you can round up Bull and Doug for me. Tell him to meet me over to the Winger place." "Okay," Chappie said. and Kirky hopped onto his motorcycle and bolted across the tracks. 2 blocks away, he spotted Skunk pushing a lawnmower down the street. Kirky skidded to a stop. "You seen the winger, boy?" "No." "Better tell me the truth, boy. It's for his own good." "Something wrong?" "To be plenty wrong if I don't get to him before that Savage boy does. Now, come on, where is he at?" "Well, he's at the river going swimming. I'm meeting him as soon as I put this moor up. You stay away from there, boy." Kirky roared off on his motorcycle. Newt, Beansy, and Jappy had crossed the river road now, and they were trooping through the brush toward Rock Cave. A cracking of brush came from about 20 yards behind them. Beansy turned. Skunk must be coming. The rest of the word froze in his mouth. "Winger!" Marcus hollered. "He's got a gun!" Beansy yelled. Newt, Jappy, and Beansy scrambled into the woods between the road and the river. Marcus aimed toward Newt and fired. "Ow!" Jappy screamed. He had caught the bullet in the leg. Marcus was running toward him. My leg! My leg!" Jappy hollered. He kept stumbling toward the road. Newt and Beansy looked back, horrified. "He's after me. Help Jappy, Beansy. Help Jappy." Newt fell to the ground and grabbed the stick Jappy had dropped. Then, terror-stricken, he rolled behind a thicket, got to his feet, and ran off in another direction with Marcus close on his heels. Beansy pulled Jappy up and helped him out to the road. Oh, God, Beansy kept saying. "Run for help, Beansy. Hurry, hurry," Jappy shouted. "I can make it from here. It's just my leg." "Are you sure?" "Yeah, just hurry." Marcus was closing in fast, and Newt, feeling it useless to run any more, stopped, the stick clutched tightly in his hand. He stood against a tree. His will was shattered, body tensed, wanting to cry out for mercy, for help, ready to fall whenever the bullet came ripping through. Marcus aimed and pulled the trigger. Click, click, click. Spasms of fear shot through Newt's body. Click, click, click. "You bastard," Marcus shouted. Then, inflamed at the misfire, he threw the gun at Newt with all his might. Newt ducked. The gun smacked against a tree and bounced off his shoulder to the ground. Looking back to Marcus, he saw him pull his knife, and he flinched as the blade popped out. Newt backed toward the road as Marcus circled to the right. Marcus lunged. Newt swung the stick. The blow aimed for Marcus' head caught him on the shoulder, knocking him off balance. But the momentum of the charge brought them into contact, and the knife, aimed for Newt's heart, sliced his left shoulder instead. Newt felt the blade tear through his skin. He hollered, jumped back, and frantically swung. The stick found its mark this time, and Marcus dropped to his knees, but quickly he was up, blood running from his nose to his chin, stalking Newt like a wild animal. "You son of a bitch, you're going to die, you're going to die." Newt felt the warm blood at his elbow, but his eyes stayed on Marcus and the glistening blade. He circled backward, being careful not to stumble, his fear mixed with great desire to survive. Marcus crouched, sprang again, low this time, and Newt swung but missed him. He jumped to the side as the blade slashed through the denim of his overalls just above the knee. Marcus plunged onto the ground. Newt started in. He hesitated. Then Marcus was on his feet again, cussing, circling, cussing. "You son of a bitch, you black bastard, I'm going to cut your heart out." The blood rolled thick over his lips now. Come on, I'm ready for you." The courage in Newt's voice enraged Marcus. He spat a gob of blood, stuck out the knife, and charged. Newt's aim was true, and as the blow smashed against Marcus's skull, he went down with a howl and a thud, the knife flying from his hand. Newt dropped the stick and dived for the knife, beating his dazed assailant to the weapon. But Marcus was not finished, and his hand curled Newt's wrist in a powerful effort to shake the knife from his hand. But Newt held on, and they wrestled to the side of the road, their bodies rolling as one in the dust, the knife extended beyond their heads. Finally, they landed in the ditch with Newt on top, and with a last burst of strength, he yanked his wrist from Marcus's grasp. Then the blade was up, the hand trembling, the arm tensed for a downward thrust. But the look of helplessness and the fear beneath the bloody mask that was Marcus's face stopped Newt's arm cold. For a split second their eyes burned into each other's. "I ought to kill you, Marcus. I ought to kill you. But I can't." A siren sounded, and they both started. "It's Kirky, Newt. Give me a chance. You'll shoot me to pieces." Newt glanced up the road, then back at his frightened enemy. "Okay, get going, and don't ever come back." He released his hold, and Marcus staggered up and started running toward the rocky ledge. Newt pushed the dirty wet blade into the groove, then felt his arm. It wasn't as bad as he had thought. The next minute he was secretly hoping, even praying for Marcus's escape. Kirky's motorcycle skidded to a stop in a cloud of dust. He jumped off, eyed Newt quickly, and drew his guns. "Well, where is he at? Are you hurt?" Newt looked toward the opposite direction from which Marcus ran. He went into the woods. "Well, which way?" Newt didn't have to answer. Kirky suddenly spotted Marcus loping toward the rocky ledge. He fired and shouted, "Halt! Halt!" Then he started running, firing and shouting at the same time. "Halt! Halt!" Newt pocketed the knife and followed. "Run, Marcus, run, run." "Stop, you black bastard! Stop, damn you!" He was firing both pistols now, and Marcus was trying to reach a safe diving position from the ledge. It was obvious he was going to attempt the river, underwater, downstream. Kirky fired again, and the bullet chipped a stone above Marcus's head. Suddenly Newt yelled, "Look out! Oh, God! Oh, God! Look out!" Marcus had slipped and was falling down toward the stone apron, screaming as he plummeted through space. Kirky's mouth flew open, and he held his fire. Newt slapped his hands over his eyes as Marcus' body smashed and crumpled against a jagged lip, stayed for a moment, then began a grotesque end-over-end plunge downward. When it splashed into the calm river, great ripples swelled from the entry point, then began wasting themselves in their own motion. The head bobbed up a couple of times. The body rolled over like a slow-moving fish, then spiraled to the bottom of the river. Kirky holstered his guns. He mopped his brow with the back of his hairy hand and spat. "Well, Winger, you can rest easy now. You won't be bothered with him no more." Newt stood gazing into the easy-moving water. "Well, ain't we going to try and get him out?" "Not now. I'll pull him out tomorrow morning. It'll be dark soon. It's a cinch he ain't going nowhere tonight." He took a plug of tobacco from his puttees and bit off a chunk. "He cut you deep?" "Not too bad. Get on. I'll give you a lift home." "Nope. I can make it by myself." "It's okay by me, boy." Kirky angrily mounted the machine and stomped the pedal with his foot. The motorcycle popped to a start and belched off in a cloudy roar. The last of the sunlight was gone now, and the crickets had already begun rubbing at the evening dampness. Newt started off, then stopped, his mind jumping back and forth between home and Marcus's body, wallowing now somewhere at the bottom. For an instant, he thought of going back, not knowing why. Then he reasoned against it. He turned for a last look at the river. The pink coloring was gone, and the gray was edging into blackness. Marcus Savage was just a memory. He felt his arm, shivered, then slowly turned homeward over the dusty road.